I feel like it's like an awards ceremony. So I prepared my little notes as a thank you to everyone that I wanted to thank, that I don't forget anyone. This was supposed to be about sharing some of the lessons that we've learned as a company, and I've been with the company for 14 years. Kind of a funny story how I ended up in it. I wasn't really, obviously, by the name, not from Vancouver. I'd done my undergrad in the US, and I just happened to find my way up to Canada because I was tired with the US in 2002. And discovered this great company called PressReader, and it's been an amazing 14 years at building this company with an amazing team that I'll talk about in a second. I absolutely loved Luis's presentation because every lesson that he has given, each one of the 5 lessons, we can subscribe to each one of them. They're incredibly broad yet specific. So when you apply it to the business that you're building, I think you will build an amazing company. The lessons that I want to share with you are slightly more specific to us, but I think I hope that you will find some inspiration in them. We are a global company, and as Penny has said, we're Richmond-based. I don't know which one of the, I think, 18 islands we're on, but it's between IKEA and the Auto Mall. Not the most glamorous area of Richmond, I'm sure, but I think what we're doing is we're cultivating a fun culture at the company. And it's been an amazing company to work with because the company has, from the very beginning, has had global aspirations. We have since opened up offices in the Philippines, in France, and most recently we've announced an opening of our office in Dublin, Ireland. So it's an amazing growth, but that growth comes with its own pains, with its own learnings, with its trials and errors. I'll admit to that, where when we started doing what we're doing, there is not a lot of inspiration to draw from. So we kind of had to learn based on our own mistakes, but hopefully we'll learn a thing or two. Why we're a global business? Well, we work within the publishing community. Some would argue probably not the sexiest industry to be in, but it's the industry that is near and dear to our hearts. And I think it's experiencing a resurgence of popularity, probably not the best way to describe it, but importance, the importance that media plays in a democratic society. We work with newspaper and magazine publishers, trying to transform them from being a legacy business, a 400-year-old business, into something that is sustainable in the 21st century. As of today, we work with over 7,000 newspaper and magazine publishers from 120 countries in 60 different languages. And these are the publishers like GQ, Elle, Vancouver Sun, the Globe and Mail, the Guardian, and everything in between. You have large publishers, you have small publishers. And the reason why we work with each one of those publishers is because we feel that each one of those publishers has a message to deliver to their end consumers. And we're all so different today that the content that we're interested in consuming is very different and it's very personalized. We have built, and it's not really, I'm not trying to be arrogant, although we have been arrogant in our business, which is something that you learn very quickly, it doesn't get you far. We're the largest content platform where people come to read, share, comment on, engage with other readers. And it's a platform that keeps on growing. So the first lesson that I want to share that is specific to us, but I think it will apply to each one of your businesses. And this is probably the golden nugget that you will want to jot down and go home and write a Medium post about it tomorrow, or maybe tonight, because it will be more fun because it's going to be slightly tipsy. People, your end consumers, are very savvy. They're smart. I mean, think of yourself. I mean, you're here, you've come to hear inspirational talks, learn a few lessons. You're a smart person. You would never admit that you're dumb. And most people in the world are incredibly smart, and they are savvy because they know what they want. They know what's interesting to them. They know they have limited time to consume content, and they find ways of reaching that content that is of interest to them. They want personalization and they want customization. They want to be in control of how they access the content and what content they access. That's why when developing our products, we decided that we wanted to put power in the hands of the people. People like yourself, like myself, like your mom, dad, your very weird neighbor, because we wanted for each individual to decide what content they wanted to consume. And it's interesting because we work with publishers, we work with newspaper and magazine publishers where you have the editor at the helm of the publication that gets to decide what content goes into that publication, how it's arranged, and what content ends up being on for the front page and what content gets in the middle and at the end. But in building our product, we wanted to give the readers the opportunity to build the product for them. They were at the helm, they were the editor, effectively, of the content that they were consuming. We also wanted to make sure that that content was accessible. Paying for content is a misnomer. It's interesting because we started out with a paid-for product. In 2003, when we released our first digital newsstand, it was a paid-for product. At the time when the publishers didn't want to charge anything for content. I mean, it sounds strange, but we would go to publishers and say, we can charge for this. And the publisher would say, no, but I want all my content to be free on the web. The web is meant to be free. And you'd say, great, well, how are you going to make money out of that? They didn't have an answer. They assumed that the advertising model will transform very well from print into digital, and they would be able to monetize that content production that way. Didn't work out that way. And 14 years later, we are where we are. But we realize that consumers have no appetite for paying for content because they haven't really grown up with that concept. They've grown up for paying for content in print, but not digitally. So what we've built is we've built a network of business partners, of brands like Bell, like Marriott Hotels, like libraries, that actually they sponsor access to that content. It's simple, right? The library has always been a place where you would go and read magazines and read newspapers. That same library can do the same thing digitally. And as a library patron, you get access to the same content. Genius, right? But that's not really the only thing why we wanted to build those partnerships. We wanted to build brand awareness, and with something like Bell locally, or something like with Cathay Pacific, where every passenger that flies Cathay Pacific gets access to PressReader, we're also scaling the business. We're making the brand more recognizable, and where people get into the habit of coming to it because they see value in it. They see content that applies to them. Content. That's been our main focus. It's been a main focus for me and my team on the publishing side. We wanted to build a platform that has amazing content that people would be interested in consuming. But the way that people, and this is the second lesson really, the way that people consume content has changed over the past 2 decades. We're an 18-year-old company, as I said earlier. We started the company by taking the content from publishers, newspaper publishers at that point, and delivering it through our really smart network to hotels. So imagine you are staying at a hotel in Thailand, you want to go on the beach, you want to read what's going on with Canucks or who won the elections in Vancouver, you want the Vancouver Sun. Now, in 1999, that wasn't very easy, as you can imagine. So the hotel would be able to print a copy of the Vancouver Sun for you, front to back, full issue, at the same time that it was available here in Vancouver. Crazy, right? And then come the smartphones, then come tablets, and certainly the way people access content and the way people expect access to content has changed over the past 2 decades. I keep forgetting to change the slides, but this is the diversity of people that we're trying to serve. And this is what we're building as an internal mantra, is you get the right content in front of the right audience at the right time, through the right channels, at the right price. So it kind of addresses everything that I have just said in terms of building the content that will be of interest to people, focusing on what that audience is, how they're accessing that content, where, and at what price. So the habits have changed. This is a very scientific graph that I want to share with you. This is how the habits have been changing over the past 2 decades. As the blockbuster sales have declined, number of Netflix subscribers has risen. As the CD sales have declined, the number of Spotify users has grown. Same thing happened in the publishing industry. And the thing is that when you focus on why this has happened in a slightly more scientific way, it's not necessarily that people don't want that content. It's that they still want that content, but they want a different experience in accessing that content. Unless you're President Trump sitting at the Bastille Day parade, people love Daft Punk. I geek out about suits. That's my legal side. But the way we want to experience access to that content, that has changed. I don't want to wait for Suits to come out on TV and wait every single week for it. I want to have it available. I want to binge watch it. We as consumers want choice. But what makes platforms like Netflix and Spotify so successful? What makes them great? It's not just the content library that they have built together. That's certainly part of it, but it's not the only thing. It's not that the consumers want to consume more content. Again, that's part of it, but that's not it. But it's the discovery of content. It's being able to deliver the content to consumers and let them discover new content. And this has been the main focus of what we've been doing at PressReader. At Netflix, they invest a lot of money in providing recommendations. And Spotify, pretty much every new feature that comes out is designed for you to discover new artists, new songs. And at PressReader, we have an amazing team that builds the home feed. Now, this is the home feed that's personalized for you. It's AI-based. It recognizes everything that you read. It looks for specific attention points on the content that you're consuming. It looks for patterns of your reading compared to other readers around you, other readers perhaps with similar interests. And it builds the content out of that whole library of content that is highly personalized to you. It's not about shares, clicks, or likes. It's none of that. It's more about an ability of creating a system that allows you to discover content that you didn't know existed. And that's what's absolutely fascinating about the AI world that has come upon us, and having the team that understands it and understands how to use it. Which really gets me to the final point. We have an amazing team. The team that is intelligent, funny, passionate about what we're doing. The team that embraces the culture that shifts with every new person that joins the team. It doesn't shift dramatically because you still have the vision ahead of you, but the culture that encompasses every single person on the team. We're hiring, by the way. So if any one of you wants to experience that great culture, come and speak to us, go to our careers page, or talk to an amazing guy that sits there called Alexei, who has our innovation lab. And he can tell you all about the cool and exciting things that we're doing. When you're focusing on building your company, focus deeply on the team that you're building. And this harkens back to what Luis was saying. The team will propel your business to the heights that you haven't seen. Thank you so much.
I've got a question regarding to this chart, because it's really interesting and it's true, right? And then I think from a customer point of view, myself see Netflix or Spotify take over CDs or stores, is that their price, right? I just simply consider Netflix subscribe or Spotify is way cheaper than buying CDs, buying movies, buying stuff from stores. But then like maybe a few years later you do the calculation, it's not necessarily cheaper, but then like the feels of making me feel cheaper is like why I should start using Netflix versus buying those stuff from stores.
remember the 5 rights that I have said, and price was one of them. There is a very different value that the consumer places in video versus music versus the written content that we're focusing on. Interestingly, we talk a lot about the price point for the product. We've done studies, the publishers that we work with have done studies, and it's difficult to say whether, say, a $9.99 price point is going to produce a significantly higher number of subscribers than a $29.99 price point. Producing content, unique content, costs a lot of money. I don't want to bore you with all the details that the publishing industry is going through, but the pricing equation of you taking all of this content and you slapping a $9.99 price point because that seems to be, the point, that's palatable to consumers is not necessarily there. You have to find alternative methods of monetization. When we speak to the publishers, it's all about diversification of revenues, because in the past, when you would buy a copy of the Vancouver Sun or the New York Times, you'd pay your $2 or $3 for that copy. That $3 never really covered the cost of production, let alone cost of generating that content. The bulk of the cost was covered by advertising in there. 85% of the cost of the New York Times was covered by advertising. And when you don't have the transformation of the print advertising into digital, you have a problem. So what did the publishers do? They slapped a whole bunch of banners on their website and royally screwed up the user experience. And the users fled. I don't necessarily want to pick on New York Times, but you get the idea. So the price point, yes, the price point is important. We feel that the price point to consumers should be 0. You find somebody else who will be willing to offset that price. And this is why the biggest focus for us on the business side has been to work with brands. Sorry? What brands are? The ones that I mentioned, for instance. Like Bell. Bell doesn't sponsor Access for everyone. You get it sponsored for a couple of months, I think, with your data plan. But what Bell has done is that you can add on PressReader to your monthly plan, and it will cost you $10 Canadian instead of a standard price of $29.95 US. A fantastic value. Now, think of a copy of a magazine. Like, I think GQ costs about $5.99 if you go to a newsstand and buy it. So imagine for $10 you get GQ and 7,000 other publications every single day. So these businesses are finding new ways of enhancing their experience. Imagine you're staying at the Fairmont or any other hotel. You come in and you get a gift of PressReader from the hotel. You instantly build a positive relationship with that brand, and this is what the brand is looking for. And it's not just at the time when you're staying at that hotel, but once you leave the hotel is then able to send you a gift. So 2 weeks later, they send you like, look, thank you for staying at the Fairmont. We'd like to give you a copy of GQ on us. Imagine that positive experience that you had with the hotel at first, how it continues to follow you along the way. So these brands are looking for new ways of reaching consumers, for new ways of kind of speaking to consumers, not through direct advertising, but in a way that you feel that that reach out is relevant to you and is non-intrusive. And this is a big part of what we're doing. So we aggregate content from newspapers and magazines. Nobody does that. Okay? So there's no real competition in that sense. There are players that aggregate magazine content. Texture is one of them. Sorry? Yes and no. The content presentation is different, as well as, more importantly, the amount of content that we get. So the content that we get from publishers is largely, is pretty much everything that they produce, whereas Flipboard allows the publisher to limit the content that gets there. So the publishers would tend to just put the content that they would put out on the website that would be free anyway into Flipboard. Flipboard has an amazing user experience, and you build a personal magazine as a result of it. But the amount of content is different. Now, That's not a criticism of Flipboard in any way. And to those who use Flipboard, perhaps that is a perfectly sufficient amount of content that they have time for to read. We believe that there is that because of the personalization element and the interest of each individual user, we want to give as much content, or we want to keep as much content in our platform that even the most obscure article, but that may be of interest to you, gets to the top when you start reading it, when you start using the product. Blendle is an interesting case. Blendle, they're a competitor in the sense that they're aggregating content from newspapers and magazines, where I think the key point of differentiation between PressReader and Blendle is that we believe that charging per article creates a friction point. We believe that in the all-you-can-read model, which is we've pioneered in 2003, even before Netflix has done that with streaming content, and the same thing with Spotify, I don't think that charging per article works, frankly. In terms of discovery of content, absolutely. Very similar, and I think Blendle is an amazing company in terms of what they're doing for the publishing industry. That's a billion-dollar question. Look, the fake news phenomenon, it's not new. It's just it's been talked about more often these days. National Enquirer is not a new publication. It's been around for ages, and nothing that was contained in the National Enquirer was true. There is a problem, and this is in terms of the technology that we're using, is that there's a shift of trust that has happened on the consumer side. As newspaper and magazine readers in the past, you developed a trusted relationship with a certain publication, a certain brand, a certain editor, etc. You've trusted that content. That trust has eroded for a number of reasons that I don't want to get into, and shifted more towards your circle of friends. And so now when you see a piece of content, you trust more that not the source where the content is coming from, but who shared it. And in fact, that trust is often so blind that you don't even read what they've shared. But because they're in your circle, like, well, this must be true. So you tend to propagate it. And this is, that snowball effect of that propagation is what has created the issue that we're dealing with today. In building credit goes back to Blendle as well, and this is something that we've been working on, is how do you build a product that, where the fake content doesn't rise to the top? So you reduce the reliance on sharing, and you focus on building that personalization element that's based on consumption of others, where you're not influencing the top, whether the story makes it to the top by how many shares or likes it has received, but it gets to the top because of the way that people engaged with that content. And you can only engage with the content if you read it and spend reasonable amount of time reading it, as opposed to just fancy headline, share it, off it goes. Clearly a very truthful and important article for everybody else to read. So technology does help. Is technology the only solution? Probably not. Algorithms have flaws in them, as you can imagine, and so a lot of time goes into refining those algorithms. We don't have human editors on PressReader, and it's something that we've been toying with, whether that human editorial element is needed. There is obviously kind of an element of censorship that comes in, or a fear of being accused of being of censoring content. But whether this will help to get consumers to pay for content, no. And this is going back to the earlier point. But rebuilding the consumer recognition of the value that's in the content, that's something that we can do as a tech company that cares about that content.
So, technology-wise, you're looking at how much time people spend with the article and whether they read it all the way through to the end and use that data as part of your process.
That's one of the many variables that goes into it. Absolutely.
I think we're going to have to wrap it up, but I know Nick's going to be around for a few more minutes after Rakesh speaks, but thank you so much. That was fantastic.
Thank you so much.
There was a free offering from Tech Vancouver. I'm going to let Nick speak to it. Oh, from PressReader.
I'm really sorry, I completely spaced on mentioning that. For those of you that want to try PressReader for yourself and see how it works, 7 days on us. Just go to this URL behind me, PressReader.com/TechVancouver, and go wild. Read whatever your heart desires.
Thank you so much.